Imagine this for a second. Your name gets called. The room goes quiet. Every eye turns toward you. Your slides are ready, but your mind suddenly isn't. Your heart races, your hands feel cold, and one thought keeps repeating in your head. What if my English isn't good enough? If that feeling sounds familiar, stay with me because today's episode might completely change the way you speak forever. In this episode of Learn English Lab, you're going to learn how to give powerful, confident, professional presentations in English without sounding robotic, nervous, or lost. From opening lines to handling difficult questions, this is the real-world speaking guide nobody taught you in school.
Yeah, and the reason nobody taught it to you is really because traditional education, it just focuses entirely on getting the grammar right on paper.
Right, like passing a written test.
Exactly. But, the boardroom doesn't care about your paper grammar. I mean, they just don't. The boardroom cares about your vocal authority. So we're really glad to have you here with us today, joining us as the third member of this deep dive, because we're going to really look at the actual physics, the psychology, and the architecture of a flawless English presentation.
Yeah, it's really about taking those incredibly complex, brilliant ideas that are, trapped in your head and giving them the vehicle they need to survive in the real world.
A vehicle. I love that.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Right. I kind of like to think of a great presentation as a journey. And you, the speaker, you're the guide, right? Taking your passengers, your audience through unfamiliar territory.
That's a great analogy.
And if the road is bumpy or if you seem lost, your passengers are going to panic. They're going to stop trusting you.
Oh, absolutely. They'll tune out immediately.
Yeah. So today we are giving you the roadmap, right? The premium engine parts, the driving skills to make that journey smooth. But before we get into the really high-level techniques, we probably need to talk about why the stakes are so incredibly high.
Yeah, we have to start there.
Like, why are we dedicating an entire deep dive to presentation skills when, you might already be perfectly fine writing a corporate email or just chatting by the coffee machine?
Well, it's because the way you present yourself in a formal setting, it disproportionately shapes how the world perceives your core intelligence.
Wow, that sounds a bit ruthless.
I mean, it is ruthless.
Yeah.
But in the global workplace, it's just the reality. We tend to conflate fluency and structural clarity with competence.
Right. So if you're standing in front of a room of stakeholders and you're stammering or you're disorganized or searching for basic words.
The audience doesn't just think, oh, they're struggling with their second language.
Yeah.
No, subconsciously they start to think they don't understand this material.
Ouch. Yeah, that's heavy. Let's paint a really high definition picture of this. Think about a scenario where two candidates are applying for a massive promotion.
Okay, like a global director role at a tech firm or something.
Yeah, exactly. So on paper, their qualifications are a mirror image. They both have the same degrees, same technical certifications, same track record of, project delivery.
Right.
They both even speak English perfectly well when you're just grabbing lunch with them. But the final hurdle is presenting their Q3 pivot strategy to the executive board.
The ultimate pressure test.
Yes. So candidate A walks in, and they don't just speak clearly, they guide the room.
Yeah, they set the context. They use rich, varied vocabulary that really signals executive presence.
Exactly. And they transition between their data points seamlessly. And when a board member interrupts with a hostile question,
they don't panic.
Right. They pause, they control their breathing, and they handle it with absolute grace.
Okay, so then candidate B walks in.
Yes, candidate B. And they pull up a slide deck that looks like a novel.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and they turn their shoulders completely away from the board to look at the screen. They just read the text word for word.
Oh, that's painful. And they're probably speaking at 100 miles an hour because their adrenaline is spiking, right?
Totally. They keep defaulting to basic phrasing, too, saying things like, this is a very big problem, instead of, this presents a substantial challenge.
Right.
And when that same hostile board member asks a question, candidate B just freezes. They get defensive, they ramble.
Yeah, and at that point, the board isn't even debating who has a better resume anymore. Candidate A gets the job before they even leave the room.
Without question, candidate A demonstrated leadership, right?
Yeah, they proved they can synthesize complex info and transfer it into the minds of others without losing the fidelity of the idea. That's what a presentation really is.
A high-fidelity idea transfer. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, and people who master this specific skill in an international environment, they get noticed. They get the VC funding. They get the promotions.
Because they make the people listening to them feel secure.
Exactly. It's an absolute career superpower.
And it's not just corporate either. If you're an academic defending a thesis or, a startup founder pitching a seed round or even a nonprofit leader trying to secure a grant, literally everything hinges on this.
Absolutely.
But here's the part that I think is the most encouraging for you listening right now. Mastering this doesn't just make you better on stage. The confidence you build by learning these mechanics, it completely bleeds over into your daily life.
Yeah, you stop second-guessing your English in casual meetings because you know you have that structural foundation to fall back on.
That is the ultimate return on investment.
But to get there, we really have to unlearn the bad habits first. We have to clear the road of the obstacles that are, currently wrecking the journey.
Right, the rubble.
Yeah, let's look at what we can call the deadly sins of presenting. These are the visceral mistakes that instantly sever the connection between the guide and the passengers.
Okay, let's start with the most obvious one, which we just touched on with candidate B reading word for word from a screen or a script.
Oh, the worst.
We have all been held hostage in the audience for this kind of presentation, right? The speaker puts up a massive wall of text, and they literally just read it to us.
And the cognitive dissonance for the audience there is immediate. Because, humans read silently much faster than anyone can speak.
Exactly. So the audience reads the whole slide in 10 seconds.
Right. And then they have to just sit there for 2 minutes waiting for the speaker to catch up. My immediate thought is always, why did you call a meeting? You could have just emailed this to me.
Exactly. It fundamentally misunderstands the medium. A presentation is a live engagement. The slides are merely visual scaffolding. They're not the building itself.
Yeah, when you read from the screen, you're essentially telling the audience that your physical presence in the room is completely unnecessary. You break the eye contact, which is the primary tether of human trust, and you just turn yourself into an audiobook narrator.
Which brings us directly to the physical delivery mistakes. Speaking too fast and speaking in a monotone voice.
These are so common.
I really want to dig into the physical reality of this because I don't think people choose to be monotone. It's a biological reaction, isn't it?
It is entirely biological. It's the human fight or flight response happening in real time right there in the boardroom.
Wow.
Yeah. When you feel anxious, especially when you're worried about your English proficiency, your brain perceives the audience as a literal threat.
Like a predator?
Exactly. The amygdala fires, cortisol floods your system, and your immediate instinct is escape. You want to get off that stage as quickly as humanly possible.
So you accelerate.
Right. You push your speaking pace from a comfortable, 130 words per minute to a frantic 190 words per minute.
And the audience feels that panic. They might not consciously realize you're having an adrenaline spike, but they feel the rushed energy. It makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, and they lose the ability to process the data because they're just trying to keep up with this torrent of words.
And alongside that speed comes the flattening of the vocal cords, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. When your neck muscles tense up from anxiety, your vocal cords literally lose their elasticity. You lose the dynamic range in your pitch.
So every single sentence comes out at the exact same frequency.
The exact same frequency, the exact same volume, the exact same speed. That's what creates a monotone delivery.
And it projects intense boredom, even if your heart is actually beating out of your chest. It signals to the audience that even you aren't interested in what you're saying.
Which is tragic because you probably are.
Right. Okay, so if pacing and pitch are physical reactions, the next mistake is a linguistic one, relying on basic vocabulary.
Oh, this is a big one.
It's a trap I see incredibly smart professionals fall into all the time when English isn't their first language. Like, they have a PhD in fluid dynamics, but when they present, they keep saying, this is very good, this is very bad, this is very interesting.
Yeah, it creates a severe mismatch between your actual expertise and your perceived expertise. If you use beginner-level adjectives to describe highly complex concepts, you shrink the concepts.
You diminish your own professional credibility.
Exactly. The audience subconsciously downgrades your authority because the lexicon just doesn't match the weight of the topic.
We are absolutely going to solve that later when we build out your executive vocabulary toolkit.
Yes, we are.
But I want to talk about two mistakes that ruin the flow of the journey: a lack of transitions and the overuse of filler words. I think of a presentation without transitions like a car missing its suspension system.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
It's driving over boulders. You get violently thrown from point A to point B with zero warning. And filler words, those are the constant potholes, basically.
Right. Filler words occur when the brain is trying to bridge a gap between two thoughts. The brain is terrified of dead air, so it commands the mouth to make a sound, any sound, while it frantically searches its archives for the correct vocabulary word.
I kind of have to challenge this a bit, though. Let's think about you, our listener. If you're speaking a second or maybe a third language, your brain is doing heavy computational lifting, right?
Oh, massive cognitive load.
It's literally translating abstract thought into a foreign lexicon on the fly. Isn't it just natural and, frankly, unavoidable to use some filler words? It feels incredibly unfair to demand robotic perfection from a bilingual speaker.
No, that's a very fair pushback, and you're right to highlight the cognitive load. A few filler words are completely natural and, honestly, humanizing.
Okay, good.
The problem arises when the filler words become a chronic crutch. Like when every single sentence is punctuated by a long, agonizing
Yeah, that gets tough to listen to.
because it distracts the audience from your message. They start subconsciously counting your filler words instead of listening to your ideas. The ultimate sign of an elite speaker isn't that their brain processes English faster, it's how they disguise the processing time.
Ooh, how do they disguise it?
By substituting the vocalized filler with a deliberate silent pause. Instead of filling the air with a sustained, while your brain searches for the right term, you simply close your mouth. You hold the silence.
Which is terrifying.
Oh, to you, the speaker, standing up there under the lights, that 2-second silence feels agonizing. It feels like absolute failure.
But to the audience.
A deliberate pause looks incredibly authoritative. It looks like you're thoughtfully weighing your words. It commands respect.
I love that reframe. Silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It has gravity.
Beautifully put.
And the final sin we need to clear out is poor eye contact. Looking at the floor, gazing at the ceiling, staring at the back wall.
Yeah, eye contact is the mechanism of accountability. When you look someone in the eye, you're demanding their attention.
Right, and if you sever that eye contact to look at your shoes, you release the audience from the obligation to listen to you. They will immediately check their phones.
100%.
Okay, we have cleared the site. We know the bad habits that derail the journey. Now we need the roadmap. We have to structure the content so perfectly that the audience's brain can completely relax.
Yes, the architecture.
Let's look at the architecture of the introduction, the main body, and the conclusion. We'll start with the introduction. The research indicates that the first 30 to 60 seconds are the most critical window of the entire presentation. Why is that window so vital?
It's because of how human attention works. When you first stand up, the audience is evaluating you. They're deciding, in less than a minute, whether you are worth their cognitive energy.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is. And if you start with a rambling, disorganized opening, they will tune out, and winning them back is nearly impossible. A master-level introduction must accomplish 5 distinct steps, in order, rapidly.
Okay, what are the 5 steps?
Greet the audience, introduce your professional self, engage them with a hook, state the core topic clearly, and finally provide the structural roadmap.
Let's dissect how this actually sounds, because theory is one thing, but execution is another.
Right.
Let's say we have a speaker, Sarah, who is the head of research. She doesn't just shuffle to the front and say, "Hi, I'm Sarah, here are my slides."
No, please don't do that.
She executes the 5 steps. So, step 1 and 2. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm the head of research and development at Tech Vision Solutions.
Notice the phrasing there. She didn't just give her name, she anchored her authority. Head of research and development. She told the room why she is qualified to speak.
And then she drops the hook, which is step 3. She says, "I'd like to start with a quick question. How many of you check your phone within the first 5 minutes of waking up?" I thought so.
That is brilliant.
Why does that work so well?
Because she didn't just throw out a dry statistic like 80% of professionals check their phones in the morning. She asked a question that forced the audience to internally confess their own behavior.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
She made the topic immediately personal to every single person in the room. When you force the audience to answer a question, even just in their own heads, you hijack their attention.
It's interactive. Then she pivots seamlessly to step 4, the topic. Today, I'm going to talk about how smartphone dependence is reshaping workplace productivity and what we can do about it. Boom. Clear, concise, undeniable.
Love it.
And finally, step 5, the roadmap. I've divided my presentation into 3 parts. First, we'll look at the data. Second, we'll analyze the causes. And third, I'll share 3 practical strategies that our team has already tested with real results. Let's get started.
Perfect.
I want to pause on this roadmap step. Why does laying out the structure like that calm the audience down?
It all comes back to cognitive load again. If you don't give the audience a roadmap, their brains have to expend energy constantly guessing where you are taking them.
Like, is she going to talk for 10 minutes or an hour?
Right. Are we just looking at problems or will there be solutions?
Oh, yeah.
When the brain is guessing, it isn't listening. By explicitly stating there are 3 parts, you completely remove the uncertainty.
The audience can relax into the passenger seat because they know exactly how long the trip is and what the major landmarks will be. So we've successfully hooked them and given them the map. Now we're driving into the main body. This is where the actual substance lives. And the danger here is the data dump, isn't it?
Oh, the dreaded data dump.
You have 20 pages of research and you just want to hurl all of it at the audience. But a well-architected main body requires profound restraint. You usually only want 2 to 4 key points maximum, and each point needs its own microstructure.
Yes, you cannot just list facts. For each of your 3 points, you must follow a 4-step loop. State the point, explain the concept, support it with evidence, and transition to the next point. State, explain, support, transition.
I really want to zoom in on that 3rd step, supporting the point. Let's say my point is that remote work is causing communication breakdowns. I can support that with data. I can say internal surveys show a 40% drop in cross-departmental collaboration.
Okay, sure.
Data is necessary, but data without a narrative is like a skeleton without muscle. It might be structurally sound, but it doesn't move anyone. The human brain doesn't remember spreadsheets, it remembers stories.
That is a fundamental neurological truth. We evolved to transfer survival information through narrative, not through bullet points. Stories activate mirror neurons in the brain, allowing the listener to actually feel what the subject of the story is feeling.
Wow.
If you want a concept to stick, you must wrap it in the situation conflict resolution framework.
Let's see how that upgrades our data point about remote work. Instead of just throwing out the 40% statistic, we frame it. Situation. Let's look at the engineering department last year. We had a brilliant team, but they were suddenly distributed across 4 different time zones.
Now we introduce the conflict. Within 2 months, the system started fracturing. Critical updates were buried in massive email chains. Deadlines were missed. The lead engineers were burning out because they felt completely isolated, and morale hit an all-time low.
Oof, the audience can feel that pain. They have been in that situation. Now, the resolution. So we introduced a single mandatory friction point, a synchronized 15-minute daily video stand-up, no emails allowed for major blockers. Within 30 days, cross-departmental collaboration didn't just recover, it exceeded our previous in-office benchmarks.
Was it the difference there? The data point is still in there, the improvement in collaboration, but now it has human faces attached to it. It has tension and release. That is what transforms a dry update into a compelling presentation.
So we have driven through the main body, hitting our 2 or 3 key landmarks with great stories. Now the journey is ending, we need to talk about the conclusion. A lot of speakers just sort of trail off, they finish their last point, look at the screen and say, so yeah, that's it, any questions?
Oh, it completely deflates everything they just built. It is a tragedy when that happens.
But why is it so bad?
Because the conclusion leverages a psychological principle called the recency effect. People disproportionately remember the very last thing they experience. If your last moment is awkward and unsure, that is the lingering impression you leave behind.
Right.
A masterful conclusion does 3 distinct things. First, it explicitly summarizes the main points, like to sum up the terrain we've covered today.
Second, it delivers a definitive closing message, a real takeaway. And third, it formally invites questions. But there's a massive nuance here that I want to make sure we don't miss. A lot of people end on the Q&A. They take questions, the final question is answered, and they say, okay, thanks everyone. Our deep dive materials suggest a completely different approach.
Yes, never let the Q&A be the literal final moment, because you cannot control the Q&A.
Oh, that's true.
What if the final question is aggressive or highly obscure or ends on a negative note? If that happens, the entire presentation ends on a sour, defensive note.
So what do you do instead?
Instead, you say, I'm going to take a few questions, and then I will share one final concluding thought. You handle the Q&A, and then you reclaim the floor. You deliver your prepared, powerful final sentence. You control the final emotion in the room.
That is such a high-level strategic move. It guarantees you end on a high note no matter how messy the questions get.
Okay, so we have the architecture. We have a killer intro, a story-driven body, and a controlled conclusion. Now, we need the premium materials. We're getting into the lexicon upgrade.
Yes, vocabulary.
We need to elevate your vocabulary from intermediate to executive.
This is where we bridge the gap between being understood and being respected. It's about replacing the basic crutch words with terminology that actually carries professional weight.
So let's do a rapid-fire replacement.
Right.
We lean on simple words because they are safe, but they lack impact. For example, in almost every presentation, someone will say, "This new software is very important. It's grammatically fine, but it's weak. How do we upgrade very important?" You deploy words that have gravity. Instead of very important, use crucial, critical, vital, essential, or paramount. Listen to the tonal difference. This software is very important to our success versus the integration of this software is absolutely paramount to our success.
Oh, wow.
The second sentence demands attention. It sounds like leadership.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about very big? We hear this constantly in market analysis. We're looking at a very big market opportunity.
Upgrade it to substantial, considerable, significant, or expensive. We have identified a substantial market opportunity, or the delays caused extensive damage to our quarterly projections. It sounds precise rather than vague.
Right.
Similarly, stop using the word show. Don't say the data shows us. Elevate it to demonstrate, illustrate, reveal, or indicate. The preliminary data clearly illustrates a shift in consumer behavior.
And one of my absolute favorites, getting rid of the word problem. Like, we had a big problem with supply chain. The word problem sounds fatalistic. It sounds like a dead end.
It does. And in corporate environments, language shapes reality. You reframe a problem as a challenge, an obstacle, an issue, or a hurdle. We are addressing a substantial challenge within the supply chain.
Because a challenge implies that there is a solution on the horizon.
Exactly. An obstacle implies it can be overcome. It projects proactive leadership rather than panic.
Let's do a deep dive into the specific advanced vocabulary words that truly separate the novices from the executives. I want to look at the etymology and the application of these words, because just memorizing a list isn't enough. You have to feel how the words work.
I agree.
Let's start with two words that define clarity: articulate and coherent.
Articulate is a beautiful word. As a verb, pronounced articulate, it means to express an idea fluidly and clearly. Think of the joints in your body articulations that allow smooth movement. When you articulate a strategy, you're connecting the ideas smoothly so they can move forward. We need to clearly articulate our value proposition to the investors.
And what about the adjective form?
As an adjective, articulate, it describes someone who possesses that skill. She is a fiercely articulate advocate for the new policy.
And coherent.
Coherent, pronounced coherent, means logically organized and bound together. If an argument is coherent, point A naturally leads to point B without any missing steps. The opposite is a scattered, rambling thought process. Like, while the individual data points are interesting, the overall presentation lacked a coherent narrative.
Let's move to the language of persuasion. Words like persuasive and compelling, they seem similar, but they operate differently, don't they?
They do. Persuasive, pronounced persuasive, is rooted in logic and argument. It means you are actively convincing someone to change their mind or take an action based on reasoning. He delivered a highly persuasive argument for reallocating the budget.
Okay, so it's very logical.
Right. Compelling, on the other hand, pronounced compelling, is more visceral. It means something is so intensely interesting or emotionally resonant that you cannot look away. She opened with a compelling anecdote about her time in the field. You can have a persuasive spreadsheet, but a compelling story is what makes people care.
What about the language of action? Strategy is great, but execution is what businesses actually pay for. Words like implementation, benchmark, and mitigate.
Implementation, pronounced implementation, is the critical transition from theory to reality. It's the process of putting a plan into effect. The design phase is complete. We are now moving into the implementation stage.
And benchmark, that's everywhere.
Benchmark, pronounced benchmark, is an indispensable corporate noun and verb. It actually originated in land, surveying a literal mark on a bench used as a reference point. In business, it's the standard against which you measure success. We need to benchmark our customer retention rates against the industry leaders.
And mitigate. I hear this in every risk assessment meeting ever.
Mitigate, pronounced M-I-T-I-gate, means to make something less severe, harmful, or painful. You cannot always eliminate a risk entirely, but you can mitigate it. We have developed a contingency plan to mitigate the potential financial losses. It shows you're pragmatic. You aren't promising a perfect world. You're promising a managed world.
Let's look at a few more high-level concepts: paradigm and leverage. These get overused as buzzwords, I know, but when used correctly, they are incredibly precise.
Paradigm, pronounced paradigm, refers to a typical example, pattern, or model of something. A paradigm shift means a fundamental change in the underlying assumptions of how a business or system operates. The shift to remote work wasn't just a policy update. It was a complete cultural paradigm shift.
And leverage.
Pronounced L-E-V-R-I-J.
Yeah.
In physics, a lever allows you to move a massive weight with minimal force. In business, to leverage something means to use an existing asset to maximum advantage. We need to leverage our existing user base to launch the new product line.
Having these words in your arsenal is like having a high-performance engine. But an engine needs a transmission to shift gears smoothly. That brings us to transitions. Earlier, I compared transitions to the suspension system of our journey. If we are driving from idea to idea, transitions prevent the passengers from getting whiplash.
Yes, transitions explicitly tell the audience's brain how the sentence you're about to say relates to the sentence you just finished. It completely removes the guesswork. We can break these down into categories. Let's look at adding information. A beginner just says, and. Right. An executive uses a layered approach.
Instead of and, you use furthermore, or moreover, it is worth noting that, or building directly on that point. It feels like you are stacking bricks to build a solid wall rather than just throwing pebbles.
Exactly. Now consider the transitions for contrast. This is where you acknowledge complexity. Novices just say, but, like, we had a good quarter, but costs went up. It's abrupt.
Right. It feels like you are negating the first part of your sentence entirely.
Yes. To sound analytical, you upgrade it. We achieved record revenue in Q2. That said, we must remain vigilant about rising operational costs. Or, while it is true that our user base is growing, we must nevertheless acknowledge the increasing churn rate. Phrases like, however, conversely, and on the other hand, show that you're capable of holding two competing ideas in your mind at the same time. It projects intellectual maturity.
And then we have the cause and effect transitions. You don't want the audience to have to figure out the correlation themselves. You tell them, as a direct result, consequently, therefore, thus. Like, the main supplier went offline, consequently, we had to source materials domestically at a premium. The logic is ironclad.
Beyond the standard transitions, our materials highlight specific native speaker expressions that manage the physical attention of the room. You don't just point at a slide and say, look here. You say, I'd like to draw your attention to the upper right quadrant of this graph. Or what is particularly striking about this data is you are curating their visual experience.
And managing their comprehension. Checking in with the room is vital, asking, is everyone following the logic so far? Or does that align with what you were seeing on the ground? Even if the audience just nods silently, you have re-engaged them. You've turned a monologue into a dialogue.
So the architecture is perfect. The vocabulary is premium. But none of that matters if the literal acoustic energy leaving your mouth is weak, rushed, or unclear. We must look at the physical mechanics of the voice. We are moving from the script to the performance.
Let's talk about the physics of speaking English, the way we manipulate breath and vocal cord tension. One of the most terrifying concepts for non-native speakers is word stress. In English, the emphasis we place on a specific syllable doesn't just make the word sound natural, it can completely change the DNA of the word.
It really does. English is a stress-timed language. We emphasize the most critical syllables by pushing more air from the diaphragm, making the sound slightly louder, longer, and higher in pitch. And as you mentioned, getting the stress wrong can fundamentally alter the grammar. There is a whole class of words in English that change from nouns to verbs simply based on where you push the air.
I realized something crazy while going through these notes. It really is just about the breath. Let's look at the word spelled present. If I emphasize the first syllable, I say present. The vocal weight drops on the pre. That makes it a noun, a gift. The team gave me a beautiful present, or an adjective relating to time. We must focus on the present.
But if you shift your diaphragm, push just a fraction of a second later, and hit the second syllable, present, it becomes a verb, an action. I will present the quarterly findings tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you stand in front of a boardroom and say, I am here to present my data, the native speakers in the room will experience a microsecond of total confusion. Their brains are expecting a gift, not an action.
It's wild. Let's do another one. record, noun form. We broke the sales RE chord. The weight is at the front.
Verb form. Please ensure we record this meeting. The weight shifts to the back. Or consider contract, noun. We signed the contract. Verb. The market will contract next year.
Mastering these subtle physical shifts is what removes the friction from your speech. It makes you sound effortlessly fluent.
And it scales up from individual words to entire sentences. Sentence stress is about emotional resonance. If I read a sentence completely flat, with equal weight on every word, we doubled our revenue in just 1 year. It's fine. It conveys data.
But it lacks conviction.
Right. But if I use sentence stress, I am telling the audience what to care about. We doubled our revenue in just 1 year. By punching doubled and won, I am injecting triumph into the data. I am guiding their emotional reaction. Now, let's look at the absence of sound. The most powerful phonetic tool in your entire arsenal is the deliberate pause. We discussed this briefly regarding filler words, but it requires a deeper analysis. A pause does 3 critical things. First, it segments information. If you deliver a complex data point, the audience needs a second to digest it before you move on.
Makes sense.
Second, it builds anticipation. The primary reason for the delay was a critical flaw in the silicon architecture. That silence makes the revelation hit 10 times harder.
And third, it projects profound control. But I want to talk about the cultural dynamics of silence, because depending on where you are from, silence in a professional setting feels very different.
Oh, that is a fascinating nuance. In many Western corporate cultures, say New York or London, the pace is aggressive. People talk over each other. Dead air is seen as a weakness, a sign that you've lost your train of thought. So speakers rush to fill the silence with noise.
Yeah, the ums and ahs.
Right. But in many Eastern business cultures, like Tokyo, a deliberate silence is a sign of deep respect and contemplation. If you answer a complex question immediately, it implies you didn't think about it deeply enough.
So for a non-native speaker presenting in a high-speed Western environment, taking a 2-second pause feels terrifying. It feels like you are showing weakness. 1, 2, it feels like an eternity standing up there.
It does feel like an eternity to the speaker because your adrenaline is distorting your perception of time, but you must trust the technique. To the Western audience, a well-placed 2-second pause doesn't look like weakness. It looks like dominance. It says, I am so confident in my position that I am comfortable letting this room sit in silence while you absorb my point. It forces the audience to lean in.
We also need to address some of the literal physical hurdles of ESL pronunciation. There are specific mouth shapes required for English that simply do not exist in other languages. Let's talk about the mechanics of the mouth, starting with the notorious TH sound. Words like this, therefore, throughout.
The TH sound is heavily reliant on precise tongue placement. Many learners keep their tongue locked behind their teeth, which turns therefore into derefore or zerefore. To produce the sound correctly, the very tip of your tongue must actually rest lightly between your upper and lower teeth. You have to push the air through that tiny gap. It feels completely unnatural if your native tongue doesn't require it, but it is physically necessary for clarity.
Another massive one is the V versus W distinction. Very versus wary. I have heard highly technical presentations derailed because variable sounded like wearable.
This is entirely about the lips and the teeth. To make the V sound, your top teeth must physically touch your bottom lip and you vibrate your vocal cords. Very. You should feel a slight buzz on your lip. For the W, the teeth are entirely uninvolved. Your lips push forward into a tight round circle. Wary. If you don't engage the teeth for the V, you lose the consonant entirely.
And speaking of losing consonants, the English language has an obsession with stacking hard consonants at the ends of words. Words like text, project, implement.
Yes, the final consonant clusters. Many languages naturally end words on soft vowel sounds, but in English, dropping the final consonant sounds unprofessional. If you say, we need to finish this project instead of project with a sharp percussive T at the end, it sounds sloppy. You have to train the muscles in your mouth to hit that final hard phonetic wall before taking a breath.
Okay, so your pronunciation is crisp, your pacing is perfect, your pauses are authoritative. You hit your final conclusion, and then the unscripted reality begins, the Q&A session. For many speakers, this is the absolute nightmare scenario because the audience is now driving the car.
The Q&A is indeed unpredictable, but here is the secret that separates average presenters from elite leaders. The Q&A session is actually more important than your prepared slides.
Really? More important?
Yes. Anyone with enough rehearsal can read a polished script effectively. But the Q&A proves true, deep expertise. It proves that your knowledge isn't just a facade. It shows how you synthesize new information, how you defend your logic, and how you maintain emotional composure when challenged.
It is the ultimate credibility test. So how do we master this unscripted terrain? The materials outline a rigorous 6-step method for handling any question. Step 1 sounds ridiculously simple, But under adrenaline, it's the hardest part. Listen completely.
It is incredibly difficult. Human nature dictates that the moment someone starts asking a challenging question, our defensive walls go up. While they are still speaking, we are frantically formulating our counter-argument in our heads.
Right. We aren't actually listening. We are just waiting for our turn to fight back.
Exactly. And when you do that, you miss the nuance of their question. You might answer the wrong aspect entirely, which makes you look evasive or disconnected. You must force yourself to listen completely. Maintain eye contact, nod slightly to show comprehension, and do not construct your answer until their mouth stops moving.
Step 2 is to acknowledge the question. This is a tactical de-escalation technique. You say, "Thank you for that question," or "That is a really insightful point."
It disarms the room. Even if the question was aggressive, acknowledging it warmly strips the aggression away. It frames the interaction as a collaborative discussion rather than a combat scenario.
Step 3 is the lifeline. Buy time. You do not have to have the perfect answer chambered the millisecond they finish speaking. In fact, answering too quickly can seem defensive or rehearsed.
This brings us back to the power of the pause.
Yeah.
You can literally say, "That's an excellent question. Let me take a moment to address that accurately." And then you hold silence for 3 seconds while you structure your thoughts. It makes your eventual answer seem deeply considered.
Step 4 is to clarify the context if necessary. If the question is a rambling 3-part mess, you don't try to answer all of it. You distill it. Just to ensure I am answering you correctly, are you specifically asking about the Q3 budget constraints? You force them to confirm the exact target before you shoot.
Step 5 is delivering the professional answer. You rely on your executive vocabulary. Based on the available evidence, or our current modeling indicates, you answer structurally, without rambling.
And then there is step 6. This is, hands down, the most counterintuitive piece of advice for someone standing in front of a room trying to look like the smartest person there. The power of absolute honesty. If you do not know the answer, you do not guess, you do not bluff, you admit it.
Bluffing is professional suicide. Audiences, especially executive audiences, have a highly tuned radar for nonsense. They can tell when you are stretching beyond your knowledge base. If you confidently guess a statistic and you get it wrong, your credibility isn't just damaged, it is annihilated. Everything else you said in presentation is now suspect.
But doesn't saying, "I don't know," make you look unprepared?
Not if you phrase it correctly. You do not just shrug and say, "I have no idea." You use the credibility architecture. You look them in the eye and say, "That is a highly specific data point. Rather than give you an estimation right now, I want to ensure you have the exact figures. Let me consult the engineering team and follow up with you directly this afternoon." What did that accomplish? It showed that you value accuracy over your own ego. It showed that you have a process for finding the truth. It is deeply impressive.
Let's analyze the case study provided in our research. It's a sample Q&A dialogue that the materials literally label the gold standard. I'm going to play an aggressive board member. Imagine I raise my hand, I look skeptical, and I say, "You mentioned that employee well-being directly improves productivity. It sounds nice, but how do you actually measure well-being objectively? It just seems like a soft metric."
And as the expert presenter, I take a breath, look you in the eye, and respond. Thank you for that question. It is actually one of the most rigorously debated issues right now in organizational psychology. Measuring well-being objectively is indeed highly challenging. Most modern researchers use a triangulated approach. First, we use quantitative metrics, hard data like absenteeism rates, healthcare utilization, and employee turnover. Second, we layer that with qualitative methods, such as validated psychometric surveys and structured exit interviews. The accuracy doesn't come from a single metric, but from triangulating the data across those multiple sources. I would be more than happy to share some of the specific validated measurement tools we use after this session, if that would be helpful for your team.
That is a masterclass in diffusion and authority. Let's break down the mechanics. First, you acknowledge the validity of my skepticism. You didn't get defensive when I called it a soft metric. You validated me by saying it's a rigorously debated issue. You made me feel smart for asking it.
Affirmation is a powerful tool. Then I admitted the complexity. I said, it is indeed highly challenging. I didn't pretend to have a magic wand.
And the structure of the answer was ironclad. You didn't ramble. You categorized the solution. First, quantitative hard data. Second, qualitative psychometric data. You used elite vocabulary like triangulating and utilization. And finally, you controlled the end of the interaction by offering an offline follow-up action. You didn't ask, "Does that answer your question?" which invites me to argue more. You provided the answer, offered a resource, and closed the loop.
It is a formula. Acknowledge, categorize, answer, offer follow-up. But as we both know, understanding this formula in the safety of your living room is very different from executing it when your heart rate is at 150 beats per minute.
Which brings us to the most vital part of the entire deep dive, the inner game. We have to talk about nerves, physiological panic, and how to actually practice so that these techniques hold up under pressure.
The biggest mistake people make with the inner game is confusing reading with rehearsing. We see this constantly. A professional will sit at their desk staring at their laptop, silently reading their slides over and over, and they tell themselves they have practiced for 2 hours. Neurologically speaking, they haven't practiced presenting at all. They've only practiced silent reading.
Why is that a problem?
Because speaking a language aloud requires a massive, complex coordination of physical muscles. The diaphragm, the vocal cords, the tongue, the jaw, and the real-time cognitive processing of retrieving the English vocabulary. Silent reading bypasses all of that. If you only ever practice silently, the first time your brain has to coordinate the physical act of speaking, those specific sentences will be on stage in front of the audience. And that is when you stumble.
You have to build the muscle memory in your actual mouth. Our materials provide 3 escalating methods for effective rehearsal. Method 1 is the outline method. This fundamentally changes how you prepare the document itself. The rule is absolutely no full scripts. You reduce your entire presentation to a single page of bullet points, just keywords and data points. Why is a full word-for-word script so dangerous?
A script is a cognitive trap. When you write a script, you naturally memorize the exact sequence of the words. If you are on stage and you forget one single preposition in the middle of paragraph 3, your brain crashes. The sequence is broken, you freeze. But when you practice using only an outline of keywords, you're internalizing the conceptual ideas, not the exact grammar. Every time you practice from the outline, the sentences will come out slightly different. That's a good thing. It makes you adaptable. If you know the core idea, your bilingual brain will always find a way to articulate it, even if you lose your train of thought.
Method 2 is the record and review method. This is the crucible. You set up your smartphone on a tripod, you stand up in your living room, and you record yourself delivering the entire presentation out loud. And then comes the truly brutal part. You have to sit down and watch the video. It is agonizing to watch yourself on camera. We all hate the sound of our own recorded voice.
It is deeply uncomfortable, but it is unequivocally the fastest way to accelerate your progress. A video recording does not lie. It strips away your illusions. You might feel like you are making great, engaging eye contact, but the video reveals you spent 80% of the time staring at the ceiling. You might not realize you say, every 4 seconds until you are forced to listen to it. You watch the video, you identify one specific mechanical flaw, like shifting your weight nervously, and you record it again, focusing only on fixing that one flaw.
And then we reach method 3. The live audience method, practicing in front of a real living human being, a colleague, a spouse, even just a friend on a Zoom call. Why do we need the human element?
Because you need to train your body to handle the chemical dump of adrenaline. When a set of human eyes is watching you, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Your heart rate elevates slightly. Your palms might sweat. Your breathing gets shallower.
You are intentionally triggering the fight or flight response.
Precisely. You want to trigger those low-stakes physiological stress responses so you can build an immunity to them. The more frequently you experience that specific cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol in a safe, low-stakes environment, the less it will paralyze you when the stakes are incredibly high in the boardroom. You learn how to breathe through the spike.
Speaking of the physical response, what about the final 10 minutes before you walk into the room? Are there pre-presentation rituals that actually alter your biology?
Absolutely. Your body and mind require priming. The research on power posing is highly relevant here. You go to a private space, a restroom, or an empty office, and you stand in a physically expansive pose. Feet wide apart, shoulders pulled back, hands on your hips, chin elevated. You hold that physical expansion for 2 solid minutes. By physically taking up more space, you signal safety to your brain. This posture has been shown to temporarily lower cortisol, the stress hormone, and increase your subjective feeling of confidence.
You also need to warm up the engine, vocal warm-ups. You wouldn't expect an athlete to run a sprint without stretching, but we expect our vocal cords to perform complex English phonetics from a cold start. Hum gently to vibrate the cords. Do some tongue twisters to wake up the articulatory muscles.
But the most profound tool in the inner game isn't physical. It is a mental reappraisal technique. There is incredible research out of Harvard Business School by Professor Allison Wood Brooks concerning how we talk to ourselves in moments of high anxiety. Her research dictates that when you are terrified before a presentation, you must never ever tell yourself, I am calm. Calm down. Just be calm.
This blew my mind when I read the notes. Because that is exactly what everyone tells you to do. Take a deep breath and calm down. Why is that the worst possible advice?
It comes down to something called arousal congruency. Think about the physiological reality of terror. When you are terrified, your heart is hammering, your blood pressure is up, your adrenaline is surging, your sympathetic nervous system is screaming. That is a state of high physiological arousal. Calmness, on the other hand, is a state of extremely low physiological arousal. Your heart rate is slow, your muscles are relaxed.
They're completely opposite ends of the biological spectrum.
Exactly. So if your heart is pounding out of your chest and you chant to yourself, "I am calm," your brain instantly rejects it as an obvious lie. The cognitive dissonance actually creates more stress because now you are failing at being calm.
So what is the alternative? What do we say?
You must say out loud, "I am excited." Why? Because the physiological symptoms of terror and the physiological symptoms of intense excitement are virtually identical. When you are thrilled and excited, like right before riding a roller coaster or meeting a hero, your heart hammers, your adrenaline surges, your breathing gets shallow.
The hardware response is exactly the same. The body is just flooded with raw energy. The only difference is the label, the software the brain slaps onto that energy.
That is exactly it. It is cognitive reappraisal. If you tell your racing heart, "I'm excited to share these ideas, I'm excited for this opportunity," your brain says, okay, the racing heart makes perfect sense now. We are excited. Let's harness this energy. It reframes the anxiety as enthusiasm. It completely changes your posture, your vocal projection, and your dynamic presence. You stop fighting the adrenaline and start riding it.
But let's be pragmatic. You power pose, you warm up, you tell yourself you are excited. Yeah. You walk out there, you are 5 minutes into the presentation and disaster strikes. Your mind goes completely blank. You lose the thread entirely in a second language. What is the in-the-moment recovery protocol?
The first rule of recovery is, do not panic. Do not let the silence terrorize you. Take a deep, deliberate breath. Look down at your notes or your slides. Take the 3 seconds you need to find your place. There is absolutely no shame in this. The audience is not judging you for taking a pause to gather your thoughts. They will only notice if you break your professional composure and start apologizing profusely.
The materials have a brilliant phrase for this exact moment. If you lose your place, you just look at the audience and say, "Let me just take a moment to ensure I am articulating this next point as clearly as possible," and then you check your notes.
It is a masterful recovery. It doesn't sound like a mistake at all. It sounds like you are being incredibly meticulous and thoughtful for the audience's benefit. You are prioritizing their comprehension.
And what if you make a linguistic error? You mispronounce a complex word, or you use the wrong verb tense.
The golden rule of linguistic errors on stage is keep moving forward. Do not stop. Do not wince. And absolutely do not apologize. If you stop and say, "Oh, sorry, my English is bad," you have just drawn a massive neon sign pointing to a mistake that 90% of the room probably didn't even notice. Native speakers make grammatical errors all the time when speaking live. It is the nature of spoken language. Maintain your momentum. Your confidence is infinitely more persuasive than flawless grammar.
We have covered an immense amount of architectural and psychological theory. It is time to bring it all together and see it functioning in the real world. We're going to look at the masterclass example provided in the text. This is a condensed 5-minute presentation titled "The Importance of Lifelong Learning." We get to see the structure, the vocabulary, and the pacing all harmonize. I'm going to read a section, and then let's dissect the mechanics of why it works so flawlessly.
Let's do it. Let's look under the hood.
The speaker, James, steps to the center of the room. He pauses for 2 seconds, makes eye contact, and begins. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. My name is James, and over the past decade, I've worked as an educator, coach, and curriculum designer across 4 different continents. I want to start with a question. Think back to the last time you learned something completely new, something that excited you, challenged you, maybe even frustrated you at first. When was that? Last year? 5 years ago? Yesterday? Because here is what the research unequivocally tells us. The moment we stop learning, we start declining not just professionally, but cognitively, socially, and emotionally.
Let's pause right there. That is a clinic in introductory architecture. He executes the greeting and the introduction, but he immediately establishes massive credibility curriculum designer across 4 continents. He is telling them why his perspective has weight. Then he deploys the hook. He doesn't state a dry fact about adult learning. He demands introspection. Think back to the last time you learned something new. He is forcing the audience to do active mental work within the first 30 seconds.
And he uses the power of the pause beautifully. When was that? Last year. He lets the question linger. Then he drops the core thesis with an advanced vocabulary word. The research unequivocally tells us, unequivocally, leaving no doubt, and he creates urgency. We start declining. It makes the audience realize there is a consequence to ignoring his message.
He then moves flawlessly into the roadmap. He says, today, I'd like to outline the paramount importance of lifelong learning. Specifically, I will cover 3 key areas. First, what lifelong learning practically entails. Second, why it is more critical now than at any other juncture in human history. And third, how each of us can implement a sustainable learning habit starting this afternoon.
The audience's cognitive load immediately drops to 0. They know exactly what the 3 pillars are. They know he is going to end with practical implementation. He used words like paramount, juncture, and implement. It screams executive presence.
He then moves into the main body. He defines his terms, so nothing is vague, and then he deploys data to support his second pillar. Listen to how he frames the statistics. He doesn't just read numbers, he creates a contrast. According to the World Economic Forum, approximately 85 million jobs will be displaced by automation by 2025. However, 97 million new roles will emerge that require entirely different skill sets.
He used the contrast transition, however, to pivot from the threat to the opportunity, and he stacks his evidence using adding transitions. Furthermore, research published in the journal Neurology demonstrates that continuous cognitive engagement mitigates the onset of neurodegenerative diseases. He used mitigates. He is substantiating his claims from multiple angles, economic and biological.
Then he gets to the practical application, the third pillar. So how do we benchmark and build this habit? I will share 3 practical strategies. He lists them cleanly, relying on the situation conflict resolution narrative structure for his examples. And finally, the conclusion.
He signals the end explicitly so the audience knows to pay close attention. To sum up the ground we have covered, lifelong learning is no longer a luxury. It is the fundamental survival skill of the 21st century. He summarizes the core message perfectly, but it's his final lingering thought after the Q&A that gives me chills.
Read the closing thought.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought. The word student does not belong to young people, or to classrooms, or to exam seasons. It belongs to anyone who remains intensely curious about the world. Wear that identity with pride. Be a student always. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
It is so elegantly crafted, it redefines a common word student and turns it into an identity. It is inspiring, it is structurally perfect, and it commands absolute respect from the room. That is the power of a high-fidelity idea transfer.
And now the challenge is passed directly to you, the listener. The materials provide a comprehensive 4-part action plan to start rewiring your presentation skills today. This isn't just theory anymore, it is time for implementation.
Step 1 is to build the physical muscle memory. Repeat complex transition phrases aloud. Take the phrases we discussed today. I'd like to draw your attention to this key metric, or furthermore, we must mitigate these risks, and literally say them out loud in your home until your tongue and jaw move through the syllables without friction.
Step 2. Expand the executive lexicon daily. Take the advanced words we covered: paramount, substantial, articulate, compelling, leverage, paradigm, benchmark. Pick just 3 of them right now. Write them on a sticky note and force yourself to organically use them in your daily emails or casual conversations this week. Make them part of your active vocabulary, not just your passive understanding.
Step 3. Architecture practice. Draft a 10-sentence introduction for a hypothetical presentation in your industry. Force yourself to execute the 5-step framework. Greet, introduce authority, deploy a hook, state the topic, and outline the roadmap. Use the new transition phrases. Write it out in bullet points, and then stand up and time yourself delivering it aloud.
And finally, step 4, the ultimate crucible. The 90-second video challenge. When this deep dive ends, stand up. Put your shoulders back, elevate your chin to open your airway, set your phone on a shelf, hit record. Speak for exactly 90 seconds explaining why you are dedicated to mastering the English language. Do not stop, do not edit. If you stumble, use the recovery techniques. Then watch it back. Evaluate your eye contact, count your filler words, and analyze your vocal stress. Doing this painful exercise just once a week will yield astonishing exponential results.
It is entirely about the repetitions. You do not build a bridge by thinking about engineering. You build it by pouring the concrete. We have mapped out an immense amount of territory today. We tore down the 7 destructive habits, from the monotone panic response to the lack of eye contact. We built the perfect 3-part architectural structure. We upgraded your vocabulary from basic to executive. We mastered the physical phonetics of stress and the commanding power of the pause. We decoded the 6-step psychology of a flawless Q&A session, and we rewired the hardware of your brain to transform terror into pure, usable excitement.
It is the ultimate toolkit for the global communicator. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Throughout the entirety of human history, there have been countless brilliant, innovative, world-changing ideas that never saw the light of day. They died in the dark. Why?
Because the person who held that brilliant idea in their mind lacked the ability to transfer it into the minds of others. Your English presentation skills are not just about passing an exam or checking a corporate box or sounding professional in a quarterly review. They are the literal bridge that allows your unique genius, your hard-won expertise, and your specific perspective to cross over and actually impact the world. If you cannot build the bridge, the ideas remain trapped inside you forever.
That is the absolute truth. You are building the bridge. Confidence is not a magic trait you are born with. It is constructed, brick by brick, vocabulary word by vocabulary word, presentation by presentation. You have the blueprints now. You have the premium materials. The rest is just having the courage to speak the words out loud. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Keep building that bridge. Keep practicing those deliberate pauses and never stop being a student. Catch you on the next deep dive.